Formula One on 5 Live.
Back to Suzuka Circuit as we get ready for the second practice session of the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. My name's Rosanna Tennant and I'm down here in the paddock and the pit lane. And we had a few spots of rain at the very end of FP1. Nothing major, no downpours, but I'm pleased to say it is dry at the moment. Very warm here in Suzuka, overcast but bright. So maybe we will get away with another dry session. FP2 coming your way very shortly. And it was business as usual in the first practice session. Max Verstappen leading the way back on top after that torrid weekend in Singapore for Red Bull and himself and his teammate Checo Perez, ahead of Carlos Sainz in P2 and then Lando Norris in the McLaren. So who is going to be best of the rest this weekend? Is it the battle for P2 or could someone dethrone Max Verstappen once again? Up in the commentary box, our lead commentator Harry Benjamin is joined by Neom McLaren Formula E driver Sam Bird, and Andrew Benson, BBC Sports chief F1 writer, is there too. A nice cosy commentary box for you guys. It's pretty warm out here, but it looks like we may get away with a dry session. Some fairly dark clouds nearby, but Harry, what are you thinking? Are we going to have a dry session or a wet session?
Yeah, dry. Going to be bone dry. I mean, it's quite humid here, as I'm sure you can attest to down in the pit lane. We are in a nice air-conditioned commentary box, I have to admit, with a fantastic view as well over the main grandstand. We're right at the back and top of the main grandstand that runs along the start-finish straight, right opposite the Aston Martin and the Alfa Romeo team garages. But it is very overcast. I'll give the weather that. Overcast, but there are some nice white puffy clouds just sort of emerging from over the mountain regions in the distance.
Well, now we've got the weather forecast done and dusted between yourself, Harry, and me down in the pit lane. I'm going to come to Sam Bird because I'm sure between FP1 and FP2 you've been up and down the grid having a chat with some of the teams. Who surprised you in that FP1 session, and who do you think's got more to deliver as the weekend starts to ramp up?
I wasn't up and down the pit lane. I was actually having a nice meeting with my boss.
Yeah, so McLaren?
Yes, it was. Thank you for getting my correct title, by the way, in the opening. It's better than being called TBC4, which has been my name recently.
I'll tell the story. Yeah. We checked into the hotel. They didn't know that we were coming, obviously, so they had us down as TBC1, TBC2, TBC3 and TBC4. We don't know who's who. We're still trying to work out.
Well, this is the thing, it stands for. Who's 1, 2 and 3?
I think producer Paddy took one.
In all honesty, I get the impression up and down the pit lane that it's a foregone conclusion as to who is ultimately the quickest this weekend. As for the pecking order for the remaining slots, it's going to be close, I think, between Ferrari, between McLaren. Sergio needs to up his game a little bit. He was down in, I think, 11th place in free practice 1, so we expect him to be a little bit quicker than what he was as well.
It was a weird one for Mercedes. They didn't run the soft tyre like others did, so they're on a sort of offset tyre strategy. But you'd think there would be more to come. Obviously, George Russell needed to bounce back after that little trip into the wall at the end of the Singapore Grand Prix. And Lewis Hamilton goes well round here, so surely they're in the mix, Harry.
You can never rule Mercedes out for sure, but from what the BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson is telling me, doesn't seem like Mercedes are in a brilliant place, Andrew.
No, Andrew Shovlin, their chief engineer, was in the press conference in between the two sessions, and he said, "We're glad it's not a sprint weekend because we've got a bit of work to do." They've not got a good balance at all. It's a bit of a pattern for Mercedes, as he described it. It's not an easy car to just land on track, and it does what you want it to do. But as they always are in Formula 1, they're optimistic that they can try and sort it out, but they were way outside the top 10, Russell and Hamilton, in the first session, so let's keep an eye on how they get on in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. P13 for George and Lewis down in P16. You talk about hitting the ground running. Of course, Max Verstappen was out of the blocks, just supreme right there from the get-go. But there are rumours that he and his teammate Sergio Perez are running different floors. So does that account for the sort of 1.5 seconds or so between the two of them?
No. I'm sorry, but no upgrade, no single upgrade that Red Bull will bring at this stage in the season, I can't see being worth 1.1 to 1.2 seconds. It could be worth a couple of tenths, a few tenths, but Yeah, I think Sergio was off the pace in that session, so I would expect him to have upped his game after looking at Max's data for the last couple of hours.
Yeah, absolutely. So P11 for the number 11 car, Sergio Perez, outside the top 10 in that first practice session. Of course, we've got a home hero racing this weekend, Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri. He was a little slow to get going earlier on in FP1, but actually a really good showing from him in P5, and his teammate Liam Lawson, his teammate for now, P9. So plenty to look out for in this FP2 session. I can tell you, I'm down in the pit lane watching AlphaTauri's garage. A lot of attention from not just the Japanese media but the global media around Yuki Tsunoda at the moment. Of course, that's not just because he's racing on home soil, it's also because of all the rumours around who will get those AlphaTauri seats for 2024. We've got a green light at the end of the pit lane, so Harry, I'm going to hand it over to you. It's FP2 time.
Thank you very much, Rosanna Tennant. Yes, as Yuki Tsunoda files out of his garage, shuts his visor down and trundles towards the end of the pit lane, where he is greeted with a green light, and he makes his way out onto the track for free practice 2. For those who wish to do a sync up, it's 58 minutes and 46 minutes left of this practice 2 session, and everybody really coming screaming out, bar we just wait for the Red Bull of Verstappen, the Alpine of Gasly, and the McLaren of Piastri, but they're all filing out one by one. In terms of the championship, this is how the points stack up. Max Verstappen, whose run of 10 consecutive race wins came to an end last time in Singapore, leads the championship, 374 points to his name. It looks like he'll snap up the title in Qatar in a couple of weeks' time. He is ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, who has 223 points. Lewis Hamilton is in third, just 10 points ahead of Fernando Alonso. So a nice battle there developing for third overall. Then comes Carlos Sainz off the back of his race win in Singapore, 142 points ahead of Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Stroll and Gasly, the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship. And over in the teams, well, their 15 consecutive race win run came to an end in Singapore with Red Bull, but they look set to wrap up the championship this weekend.
Quick radio check, please.
Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa.
Pierre Gasly doing a suitable radio check here for being in Japan. But Red Bull, 308 points they are ahead. They need 309 points to be ahead by come the end of this weekend. So they need to basically beat Mercedes by a point and not let Ferrari outscore them by 24 points to seal the constructors come the end of this weekend. Mercedes are in second, Ferrari third. Just 24 points between those two. So Mercedes and Ferrari, that battle for second not over yet. Aston Martin, McLaren are the top 5. Alpine, Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo and AlphaTauri. It all starts to concertina up at the back of the pack in the constructors. But that's how things look. Pretty much everybody on track, bar Verstappen in his Red Bull and Piastri in his McLaren. And I suppose we kind of covered it off right at the start, Sam, but the big question coming into this weekend and after free practice 1 was Singapore a one-off for Red Bull, or was it back to business as usual? It absolutely is back to business as usual, but perhaps trouble for Mercedes, and it's looking tight at least in the battle for second behind Red Bull. So there's a few storylines to follow.
Yeah, we're really having to pick at the storylines, I feel. But certainly Max Verstappen, he came here to Suzuka with a point to prove, even though there's no point for him to prove. I mean, he will be a triple world champion by the end of the year. But this whole Ferrari coming back at Red Bull story, I think he's very much squashed that in one free practice session. He is still by far and away the fastest driver in by far and away the fastest car, and that culminated in a lap time that was so unbeatable in free practice 1. It is interesting, the dynamic behind him, who is the next best car. I do think Ferrari and McLaren will be fighting for the remainder of the podium. Sergio Perez needs to be talked about in the mix as well, but yes, Mercedes have come here and they do look to be struggling for pace. They are well off it at the moment in sort of 13th, 14th position, not really threatening the top 5 at all.
Yeah, and they have bought some upgrades this weekend, but clearly with lots of work to do. We should also cover off in terms of tyres. Pirelli have brought a new test prototype tyre for the Friday here in Japan. It's to test the C2 compound ahead of homologating that next year as the new C2 compound. So that's given everybody a couple of extra sets to play around with to factor in that. And actually a lot of the majority of the field are out on that development tyre, with the exception of Sergio Perez, of Lando Norris in the McLaren, and of the other McLaren, Oscar Piastri. There on the mediums. Verstappen heads out straight away on the soft. Sargent is out there with Tsunoda on the hard.
Well, one thing I would say about Mercedes, though, is that if you look at the results from this year and last year, you would say that they've been underperforming from where they want to be. But if you take it in the context of they are having to play massively catch-up on their car compared to Red Bull, they are over a year behind in terms of the development on the structure and side pod shape and positioning compared to their immediate competition. They've actually not done that horrendous a job in trying to catch up.
We'll just have a look.
And as Lewis says about his floor going wide again at Degner 2, I think that they've actually caught up okay, but they're still way behind where they want to be.
Yeah, well, the 6-time Suzuka winners are Mercedes. Not looking likely to make that 7, but hey, never say never. It's Formula One. But certainly Max Verstappen straight out of the blocks, really. First lap times coming in, though. Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo is currently fastest. He's gone in with a 1:33.1 ahead of Perez. Albon, Sainz, Alonso, the top 5, but they're just getting started, really. Only a few laps completed by everybody on the track. This is the sound of Oscar Piastri in his McLaren as he makes his way through turns 1 and into 2, the long sweeping right-hander before immediately you're easing on and off the throttle, really, aren't you, Sam? You don't really have do you even need to touch the brake pedal in this first sector of the lap?
You're breathing on it occasionally, and then it's all about how you bleed on and off the throttle pedal. It's a joy to watch this section. I wish I was driving. And
actually, we just had a brilliant view of the visor camera, the helmet camera, and as he comes into Degner 1, the quick right-hander, the gravel is to your left, and it's a short stretch before you're immediately into the braking zone again for almost the 90-degree right-hander of Degner 2 that brings you out on the exit. The sun starting to get a little bit lower in the sky at the point for Piastri, really blinding the camera at the very least, and I'm sure giving him a good view from his cockpit. But good news for Piastri coming into this weekend, the rookie, who I think came in with a lot of clout around him into Formula One in this his rookie season. He has got a contract extension now, signed, sealed and delivered. Back it with McLaren until the end of 2026, so that brings it the end of the first year of regulations with his teammate Lando Norris. I believe his contract takes to the end of 2025, so almost Norris hedging his bets a little bit before the new regulations come in. But with your McLaren on or off, I don't know which one's better. McLaren have got a good enough, haven't they? They've done well to sort of coax Piastri away from, of course, Alpine, but he was property. You don't win from Renault Euro Cup F3, F2 year after year in the first year of trying without having something about you.
No, he's one of those once every 5, 6, 7 year talents that comes along and simply has to be thrown into a Formula One car. I think
but even he's the last have a year on the sidelines.
Yeah, you look at who's come through the last 10 years. It's Max, Lando, George, Charlin, and now Oscar is the latest one probably of that young crop that has really delivered in the lower formulas, coming up through the ranks in Formula 3, Formula 2, and teams were scrapping for his signature, and he's rightly got the extension. And I don't think you can say it this year, but certainly next year or the year after, McLaren would be in the argument for having one of the strongest driver lineups. I think he needs another year, but then after that, I would certainly say that they're in that discussion.
Well, Piastri has the upgrades on his car now that Lando Norris got the benefit of in Singapore, and of course Norris finished second there. So Piastri, last time he got the upgrade second, he was immediately back on the pace in Silverstone, and I believe there were 2-3 on the grid, weren't they, for that? So fantastic effort. We just see Max Verstappen come across the line, his first proper effort on his soft compounder tyre, and I think he ripped a bit of tear off of his visor, and I think a little bit got caught, or at least the ends of his tear off just seemed to be flapping about quite a lot on the side of his helmet, more so than usual, I think. So I don't know if he just got a bit caught on the side, but it obviously didn't slow him down because he went fast. It's 1:31.377, almost 7.5 tenths quicker than Lando Norris, who is on the medium compounder tyre. But Verstappen then, it is interesting, straight out of the blocks on that soft tyre.
I expected a bigger gap to Lando Norris.
Yeah.
So either Lando's done a very, very strong lap on the medium, which I think he has, compared to Oscar. He's 1.3 seconds up the road from Oscar right now, so I think Oscar's had a bit of a weak lap. But certainly Max, I would have expected a larger delta between the soft and the medium compound tyre, and also the McLaren and the Red Bull car.
Pierre Gasly is making his way around at the moment. He's currently down in 19, looking to get his first proper lap time on the board as he comes into Spoon Curve. And as you could a bit of chatter around the Alpine team, the break between FP1 and FP2, but it surrounds Mick Schumacher, who is currently reserved for Mercedes. But Alpine and Bruno Faman, who is currently leading that team at Alpine, saying, well, we are in talks with Mick Schumacher about a World Endurance Championship drive in the hypercar category. But this got me thinking about the role of reserve in this day and age. Because Sam, you used to be the reserve driver back in the day for Mercedes, working alongside Michael Schumacher, Nico Rosberg, and you were there when Lewis came into the team, right? But your day-to-day role back then, and then when you look at what a reserve driver does now, it feels like it's almost a bit more of just a sort of brand role rather than doing the nitty-gritty. Or am I a bit wrong in that?
No, you're wrong. I mean, I was superb at drinking their coffee in their hospitality suite for many years. No, I don't think the role has changed so much. I think when it changed was when we had the more of a testing ban come into Formula One. Back in the early 2000s, F1 teams had a whole test team that was travelling all around Europe doing, multiple days. And every week they'd be somewhere new. They'd be at Estoril, Jerez, Barcelona, all these tracks developing their race cars, and you didn't have so much simulation. You did a bit, but you could go actual testing. Sorry guys, I'm just going to cough.
The etiquette there, the broadcasting etiquette.
I thought that was good. Anyway,
are you okay?
I'm very good. No, I'm good. Anyway, once they brought in that ban, the role of the reserve driver was be there just in case and do simulation back at base. But when you get to the circuit, it was more show people around the VIP area, and there wasn't an awful lot else to do, to be honest. You're there almost hoping that somebody gets maybe a bad tummy or a headache and you have to jump in and you get a chance, but you don't actually wish that on them.
Ooh, sorry, just seeing Kevin Magnussen there coming into turn one and immediately having to get on the brakes and slide round the outside of the Ferrari in front, and they pull up side by side. Magnussen on the curbs, and I think giving a bit of a sarcastic thumbs up to was it Carlos Sainz? I think it was, who was rather slow on the racing line there as Magnussen was coming in for a hot lap, and now Sainz is just coming out of Casio Triangle now round the final corner and gearing up for a lap. So I wonder if the stewards will look a little bit at that. It is just a practice session. Magnussen currently down in 13th, Sainz in 9th, but on a hot lap now on that medium compounder tyres, so perhaps a good time to head down to Rosanna.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's much muggier down here in the pit lane than it was in FP1. I know we had those few spots of rain at the end of FP1, but they definitely seem to have cleared off. A little bit of blue sky here and there, but it's feeling a little bit more like Singapore, Harry, down here in the pit lane. And I'm just watching Lando Norris in the garage at McLaren. His mechanic's having a really good look underneath the car, and we heard, Esteban Ocon hit a curb earlier on in FP1 at turn 9. this circuit bites a little bit. It's not just the runoff being a little bit tight. It's a tricky track to get right. His teammate Oscar Piastri just coming in now again, of course, fresh from inking that deal with McLaren for another couple of years.
Yeah, it is a tricky track. The only figure of 8 layout, 18 turns, 10 to the right, 8 to the left, just over 5.8 kilometres, 3.6 miles, and we'll get 53 racing laps, hopefully, come Sunday. But it is a tricky track, and humid. It doesn't feel... well, Singapore is one they train specifically for, the drivers. That is a tough one. You can see it on their faces when they get out of the car. I can't imagine this kind of humidity is too challenging at a track like this for the drivers.
No, this one, I think, in terms of the heat, isn't so bad. It's more the lateral loading on the body and the G-forces subjected constantly in how hard you're working in the car. And the concentration levels at this circuit are very high. Big shout out to Alexander Albon, currently in the Williams in 4th place. I know it's early days in the session. He's on the medium compound tyre, 9/10 off Max Verstappen, and only 2/10 off Sainz and Norris in 2nd and 3rd. We don't know their fuel level. I presume they are quite a bit lighter than the Ferrari and the McLaren. However, still, it's impressive from Albon, who I think is definitely having his best season in Formula 1 to date.
Oh, he's come alive, hasn't he, in the Williams? Leclerc has come alive in the middle sector as well. It's just crossed the line and gone 3/10 off of Max Verstappen. Still fastest on that soft compound tyre. Then comes Leclerc. Sainz in 3rd, and let's see where Fernando Alonso ends up in his Aston Martin as he comes through and out of the Casio triangle. Little twitch on the steering wheel as he battles with the Aston to get it round the final corner. The slight right-hand kink and across the line for Alonso, and he slots himself into 7th. So it's Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Norris, Perez, the top 5. Albon, Alonso, Piastri, Ocon, Stroll, the top 10. Bottas, Gasly, Tsunoda, Zhou and Magnussen, the top 15. Hamilton, Lawson, Russell, Hülkenberg and Sargent, 20 drivers who have all set a lap time. On a mixture of tyres, we've got the medium, the soft and the test C2 tyre that Pirelli have brought for Friday to allow the teams to give that a go before introducing a slightly new design for next year. A few cars struggling and locking up coming into that Casio triangle, turns 16, 17 and 18, the last sort of section of corners that bring you out, then pit lane entry to your right as you come onto the main straight.
Sure, for damage. Skateboarding on the top in turn 9.
And that is Alex Albon. Just as you're complimenting him, Sam, he runs over and does what Sargent did earlier today. Lewis Hamilton coming out of Degner 2, just riding that curb.
Well, just think that's hundreds of kilos forced down on that concrete curb. It's going to rip a hole, a line through that kind of the protective wood called the plank on the bottom of the car, so that'll need to be changed for sure. Don't know whether that'll be done in session, whether he can run through the session, but what you'll lose is some downforce points from underneath the car, and at a circuit like this, that's the last thing you want to happen.
George Russell just starting a lap now. This is the sound on board the British driver as he comes into the braking zone for turn 1, down through the gears to 4th gear as he makes his way through. Back to the reserve driver chat. Do you think, from a driver perspective, even if we go back to pre your time as a reserve, obviously there was so much more in-season testing that you could almost be a reserve driver full-time. That was a career for some.
Absolutely.
And they would pump in the mileage and it was unrestricted. But of course with that, and one of the reasons for it being banned pretty much is the amount of money that cost and the unsustainability of that. But is there some sort of argument or case to be made where if it's regulated, we could see that maybe start to come back in some form and exclusively sort of for reserve?
I would love to see that for young drivers coming up through the ranks for reserve drivers, where they, if F1 teams were told, right, you have 8 days of testing a year during season, so you can assemble a small test team, you can go and do 8 days through the year in the current car. What a lot of teams do now is they will run a 2-year-old car and use their reserve and young drivers to stay fresh and current, run them in a 2-year-old car, so it's not the most current of their technology and aerodynamics. I think, why not run them in the current stuff? Let's do some real development. Because surely running an old, it doesn't matter whether you run an old car or the brand new car. You're still running a car somewhere. So
yeah, I think it just seems, you have this almost kind of wasted talent. I mean, I know Piastri in his year off got so much time with Alpine, but that's because he was part of the Alpine Academy beforehand, and they put a lot of money in him, and I think he was able to bring a bit of money to have some.
But that's what I mean. If they made these
2-year-old car.
If they made these test days that they're doing anyway, official test days, invited crowds, you'd get more revenue for F1, for shirt sales, whatever.
Give this young talent a shot. You've got Felipe Drugovich sitting in Aston Martin.
Get them in the limelight a little bit in front of people. Showcase and have direct comparisons against their competitors. I think it would be very interesting.
I have seen the argument that for sprint races, it should purely be for reserve drivers to have a chance to have a race in a shortened race on a race weekend. So instead of the main drivers, you've got Stoffel Van Dorn lining up in an Aston with Felipe Drugovich on the other side, and McLaren. They've just signed a Japanese driver called Ryo Hirakawa, a Le Mans winner. Give him the chance. I'm not sure I can quite see that happening, but I love the idea of it.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of it as well. Imagine that, you've got your reserve drivers who contribute towards the World Championship as well. It'd be nice.
Yeah. Well, a couple of lap times just being set, and interesting ones to look out for by both the Mercedes drivers who have stuck on the soft compound tyre. Russell came across the line first, put in a 1:32.0, 6/10 off of Verstappen's pace. Hamilton has just come across the line as well, but he is 8/10 off, 1:32.2 for him down in 6th. Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell, Sainz, Norris, the top 5. Hamilton, Logan Sargent up in 7th ahead of Sergio Perez, Albon and Alonso the top 10. Rosanna.
Just outside Alex Albon's garage at Williams, and that's the sound of his car fired up, tyres are on, and he's ready to get out there. Of course, we heard him just earlier on saying that he'd skated over the curbs at turn 9. That area of the track proving tricky for drivers such as Esteban Ocon as well. He's come back into the garage, Alex Albon. Mechanics have checked him over, and it looks like he is ready to go. His number 1 mechanic guiding him out now into the fast lane. And that's him done, out onto the track again for Alex Albon. Currently in P9, he's got the soft tyres on. He's already done 4 laps on the medium.
I'm back. Thank you very much, Rosanna. Good to hear then. Only a couple of cars in the pits at the moment. 37 minutes and 50 seconds remain. Hashtag BBC F1. This is getting some people talking. Lucas said, couldn't agree more. Under the cost cap, there is no reason why mid-season testing can't be implemented. Give the young talent a chance to develop. I think that precisely agrees what we want. If you can do it in a way that it's within, you're not getting teams spending countless amounts of money and gaining a massive advantage by testing more than any other team. It's regulated. You could even broadcast it. I think it would go a massive long way. So hashtag BBC F1. Let us know your ways of what would you like to see Formula One give for young talent to get more of a shining light on them in Formula One. Owen has said, question for Sam Bird. Is he only working for the Formula E team, or is he on the simulator rotor for Grand Prix weekends? What's the deal with McLaren? Have you got a contract with you? Can we have a look at it?
No.
TBC.
TBC. See all those zeros, don't we?
TBC for TBD4.
Exactly. I can't confirm or deny anything that's in my contract, unfortunately.
Watch this space. This is the sound of Kevin Magnussen, a former McLaren man, of course, coming out of the hairpin up through the gears. Personal best in the first sector. What's he out there on? He's got the soft compounder tyre that Haas kind of dreading this weekend, I think, off the back of a slightly surprising Singapore. They thought they wouldn't be as bad there given the nature of the track, bumpy, tight, twisty street circuit. But I think Kevin Magnussen's performance certainly surprised himself too. He qualified 6th. And both Haas cars getting into Q3 ahead of both Red Bulls, and Magnussen managing to cling on for a point. Nico Hülkenberg also felt there were points on offer, but he was kind of done out of those by poor safety car timings and a slightly wrong strategy call from Haas. But let's see what Magnussen has got as he comes across the line. He goes 6th, but I tell you who's on a fast one. Lando Norris in the McLaren, personal overall best in Sector 1. He's on that soft compound of tyre as he approaches Spoon Curve, Sam.
Absolutely, going over that data with him really paid dividends. No, the McLaren. This track was always going to suit the McLaren. Everybody was talking about it prior to the event. Even Max Verstappen thought that McLaren would look quite good, as he is currently 2 tenths up on Max Verstappen's time. Of course, Max Verstappen did that on effectively his first flying lap of the session, so we expect him to again go quicker. But again, strong showing from McLaren and Lando Norris.
Took quite a lot of curb there, I thought, coming through Casio Triangle, and he really, as he comes out that final corner, the slight right-hand kink, he hides over to the right-hand side, closer to the pit wall, and he has gone fastest. Over 2 tenths clear for Lando Norris, a 1:31.152, and the Go Lando signs are being held by the McLaren fans in papaya orange with the hats on as well. Absolutely loving to see that, as Hulkenberg goes 5th. So he's up there in the Haas. It's Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Bottas, Hulkenberg, the top 5. Russell, Sainz, Joe, Magnussen, Hamilton, the top 10. Sargent, Perez, Albon, Alonso, Piastri, as he's just about to gear up and start his flying lap on the soft compounded tyre. Tsunoda, Stroll, Ocon, Lawson and Gasly down in 20th.
So we're in the middle of the soft tyre runs at the moment, so the order's going to change a little bit again in a minute. But I just want to make a point about the Mercedes drivers. They've just done their soft tyre runs, and they're still slower than the Ferraris were on their medium tyres. That does not bode well for Russell and Hamilton at all. They've been beaten now. Hulkenberg's ahead of Russell in the Haas. Bottas is ahead of Russell in the Alfa Romeo. Alex Albon's just gone ahead into 3rd place of the Mercedes. So unless there's something I don't know about Mercedes qualifying simulation runs, this is looking really, really bleak for Mercedes at the moment.
I mean, unless they're ultra heavy on fuel, which I don't think they would be. They tend to run, like a bit like Red Bull. They don't like to show their full hand. Whereas Williams, we know, tend to run a little bit lighter. Same with Alfa Romeo, same with Haas, a smidge lighter. But yeah, I think that they are just off the pace currently this weekend.
Well, let's see what Piastri can do in the McLaren. His teammate went fastest on that soft compounder tyre, pipping Max Verstappen, who set his lap time rather early on in the session. He's now still in the pits as Piastri comes into the braking zone for turn 16, claps the curb on the inside, then a quick shift and turns the steering to the left. Then it's managing it round the final right-hand corner, pit lane entry to your right. He comes across the line, half a second down, but it's quick enough for 4th fastest for Oscar Piastri.
I just want to say as well, we've got the Ferraris now out on the soft tyres. They've not done a lap on them yet. They're obviously just starting one. Verstappen, I assume, might do a second run on the soft tyres. I don't know. It'd be unusual. They're running an unusual session, Red Bull, starting on the softs. That's not what teams would normally do. Both Ferraris have got the new floor on them for this session. Leclerc ran it in the first session, and Sainz has had it fitted to his car, so it means that even though Leclerc was 4 tenths off Sainz in the first session, they saw enough from the data to show that the floor was working. So it must have been that Leclerc had messed up his lap, Sam, as we discussed in the middle of the night in the UK. But Leclerc's on his lap now. He's coming through Spoon. Take us through it, Sam.
So out of Spoon, turn 14 onto the back straight, which is called the Western Straight, I believe, because it's the most western part of the circuit.
Apparently.
And then we're coming to what is now a very easy flat out 130R. He's just over half a tenth up on Lando Norris, the Ferrari working pretty well at this stage of the weekend. We have definitely seen an upturn in their performance over the last 3 weekends. We know they still eat their tyres a bit. However, Charles Leclerc goes to the top of the timing, 1.5 tenths up on Lando Norris.
And that's really interesting. We've got Sergio Perez coming to the end of his lap now. Where's he going to go? He's only gone 6th, so he's obviously still got some work to do in the Red Bull. But just back to Ferrari. This is exactly the sort of track where Ferrari were not working well earlier in the season. They were not competitive at Silverstone, for example. They didn't go that well at Spa. Fast, long-duration corners, that car's really struggled with. Remember, look back to Miami. Leclerc crashed in that long corner. I can't remember the number, about a third of the way through the lap in Miami. Yeah. So all the work they've been doing on trying to get some extra stability into the car, improve its performance on aerodynamic efficiency tracks like this, it does seem to be paying off in relative terms.
We've certainly seen something, Andrew, because you look at the last 3 races. You've got Monza, you've got Singapore, and you've got Suzuka. Now, all of those have completely different characteristics. They're not like each other in any way, shape or form. Different amounts of grip level, different kinds of car you need in order to be competitive. Yet, at all of those 3 circuits, they've been up there or thereabouts.
The concern for them was that they were not good at Zandvoort. But what's interesting about Zandvoort is on Friday, they've talked about it a number of times now since then, they did a lot of testing in practice to try and work out what was going wrong with the car, how to make it behave better for them. And both Leclerc and Sainz have been saying that those sessions that they did that work in have been very productive for them, and it really does look like it. And okay, it's only second practice, we can't assume anything just now. We've got Leclerc, a video here of replay of Leclerc sliding through Degner 1. That's a fantastic shot. Sparks flying from the bottom of the Ferrari. It does look like they've made a step forward since that test session in Zandvoort.
Sainz did come across the line and was third fastest, about 2/10 off as Fernando Alonso gears up for a lap. Let's head down to Rosanna, who I believe is outside Aston Martin.
Yes, I am. Just watching Lance Stroll head out on track, and if you were listening to us in FP1, you'll have heard me say that there was a bit of sort of stress in the Lance Stroll side of the Aston Martin garage. An engineer, Ben, his engineer, come running across from the pit wall, talking to Lance in the cockpit, face to face, not using the team radio. And it turns out there was actually a little issue with his team radio, so hopefully that's all sorted. He's just headed out on the circuit on the soft tyre. The Mercedes now of Lewis Hamilton coming down the pit lane. You guys were talking about some cars obviously running heavier than others in terms of fuel. And this track, I mean, I've been told this, so I'd love to chat to you about this, Sam. I've been told that this is one of the highest mass sensitive track the season, which means that actually if you're carrying more fuel, you're going to be penalised more in terms of your lap time and your performance. So can you feel that as a driver? And is it because it's a lateral G track? Are you feeling the lateral forces more than the longitudinal forces?
I think that when a car is cornering, especially if the fuel sensitivity, when you're asking the car to change direction, if it's heavier, it just takes that little bit longer to make up its mind to change direction, and then that causes a slower minimum speed, and that then has an effect on the next corner and the next corner. You're never in a straight line at this track, and I think that yes, that is definitely why the lateral cornering effect when heavier on fuel.
Fernando Alonso comes across the line as Aston Martin on that soft compound tyre and puts himself up into 5th spot, 4/10 off Leclerc. Norris, Sainz, Verstappen, Alonso the top 5, Albon, Piastri, Perez, Bottas and Hülkenberg the top 10.
I think we're about to see a reorder, Harry, because Verstappen's out on a second set of soft tyres, as I predicted a few minutes ago, and he is setting purple mini sector times, isn't he?
Yeah, he's going well in that first sector. He's just coming into the second sector now. We've just seen a bit of a hairy moment between Kevin Magnussen and one of the Alpha Tauris coming very close to contact as they come into the S's. This is the sound of Zhou Guanyu, who out of Degner 2 gets a huge kick out of his rear in the Alfa Romeo and just about corrects it, runs over that curb, bottoms out and starts being lifted up and rides it like a skateboard, and that would have been a bit of a bumpy ride, Sam.
It would have been, as we go back to Max Verstappen exiting Spoon Curve now, already quite some way up the road from everybody else.
How far ahead do we think this is going to be?
I think 4/10 up the road. What do we say? 3/10 up the road from everybody else, approaching 130R. Now, the last sector hasn't been his strongest area to get right this weekend. He's been blisteringly quick in Sector 1, which is the area that you'd expect the Red Bull to be quick, where there's change direction and high loading as he crosses the line. Okay, 3.2 tenths up on Charles Leclerc. That's not the gap that we expected, but it's still a chunk quicker than everybody else.
Yeah, so Verstappen then back to the top of the timings. George Russell is out on a quick lap at the moment, coming into Sector 1. Stroll as well, plumb last 2. He's going personal bests in the mini sectors for himself, but he's plumb last at the moment in 20th. But everyone then out, or who is out on that soft compounder tyre. Russell comes into the braking zone for the hairpin, left hand down, almost full rotation as he then sets the steering wheel back straight up through the gears and to the run through the right-hander of 12, long sweeping right-hander of 12 before you get into the braking zone for Spoon Curve. Turns 13 and 14, almost a double left-hander really, and you run out slightly wide on the exits. take a bit of the curve down the west stretch, as we're calling it, towards the fast left-hander of 130R.
As you're calling it, Harry.
Sam Collins is calling it. I think west stretch sounds cool. I think it's a nice name for it. Through 130R and down into the Casio Triangle, and takes a little bit of curve, but looking nice and tidy. But in terms of pace, well, he's personal best for himself as he comes across the line. It's a 1:31.328 for George Russell, which puts him into 5th, behind Sainz and ahead of Alonso, with the Mercedes pit wall watching on from the garage, but not giving any information away from their facial expressions. All fairly straight-faced.
That's the way you got to look in an F1.
Were you ever conscious when you were sat in the back of a garage and you know you're on camera? Were you sort of on purpose straight face?
You've got to
Don't
look.
give anything
You've
away.
got to look extremely serious.
Yeah.
If you're
Can't do a little cheeky wink and wave to the camera.
If you look happy, you're not serious enough. Stop smiling. Look serious.
You're not on camera now. You can smile now.
I don't do smiling.
Yeah.
I'm sat next to you.
Oh, come on, Birdie. Right, who's out there then going well? It's calmed down slightly as they are on either outlaps or coming into the pits, and actually a lot have come into the pits at the moment, so not too many cars out on track. 24 minutes and 15 seconds remain of this session. Carrie says, hashtag BBC F1, on our chat about junior drivers or reserve drivers, I'd be more supportive of the sprint races if they were done by either reserve drivers or junior drivers or both. I'm aware that some reserves are also competing in other series, so maybe a combo is needed to actually work. Is there something to be said? All these teams have academies now, pretty much, of varying degrees of involvement. But the F1 Academy that came in for this season, the all-women racing series for next year, every team in that, every car is going to be aligned with a Formula One team, and all bar, I think it's 2 or 3 that aren't going to be, because there's not enough F1 teams to do that. But those that are left over are going to be aligned with high-flying brands associated with Formula One. Is there something to be said that could be done? That should be done for Formula 2, Formula 3 as well.
Potentially, but I think that there's a lot of things that Formula One does exceptionally well at the moment, and that's why its popularity has just escalated over the last 7-8 years, especially with Drive to Survive, the fights between Lewis and Max over the past numerous seasons. I think that it's been incredible to watch. However, there's still a lot more that I think Formula One can do, not only for itself, to help itself, but also for the surrounding motorsport landscape. I don't think enough filters to other things. I think that there's more that can be done for women within motorsport, and I think there's more that can be done for the categories just immediately below and or around Formula One to ensure their safety, that they thrive, that everybody can have a decent living, and they can make more superstars than just the people in Formula One.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and Carrie suggesting that as well. Thank you on hashtag BBC F1. It's a really interesting topic, and one that is not a new conversation. Of course, we've had this conversation.
No, and it reminds me very much of the issue within football and the landscape there. You've got the Premier League, who just takes all the money, and then when you filter down to the Championship and League One, there's no money for those people. The disparity is huge. Going back to what we've got going on here in FP2, though, Lewis Hamilton has put on another set, I believe, of soft compound tyres and is going green in all of the mini sectors in Sector 1. So I assume that he's out on another new set.
Yeah, he
Andrew?
is.
Must be. He certainly needs to go green in all his sectors, doesn't he? Let's see where it puts him. Oh, he's 6 tenths down after the first sector. So I was about to say, let's see where it puts him. Let's see where it puts him, I should say, in comparison to teammate George Russell, who's looked a little bit more comfortable in the car so far this weekend. It doesn't look like he's going to be as quick as Russell on this lap either.
Well, that's been the case, hasn't it, really, for the last few races? Russell has found a bit more of an affinity with this car, and for Lewis, it seems like he can find maybe the ability of the car quite quickly, and then it starts to fall away from him. He is, I believe, my timing screen is correct, he's on new softs, so he's coming out of Spoon curve
no grip through Spoon. That wasn't just an oversteer, that was a four-wheel slide across the surface. That car does not look like it's got enough grip, enough downforce and mechanical grip to sustain the punishment that Lewis is trying to subject the tyres to in some of these higher minimum speed corners. Also in the hairpin turn 11. Now, a lot of the drivers these days, as he goes only 14th, 1.1 seconds off the pace of Max Verstappen. Turn 11, the hairpin, a lot of drivers these days, they don't go to the apex on the inside. They try and run the speed through the corner, but going slightly wider. What you do there is you cover more ground, you make the circuit longer, but that is outweighed by the fact that you can carry more speed. A little bit like the V versus the U shape. What Lewis did there was run right round the outside, but he couldn't carry the speed. So he's just done effectively a longer lap without any positive gain.
This is really troubling for Lewis and Mercedes. Russell managed to go 5th, Hamilton only 14th. And they are in a bit of a battle as well, constructor-wise, with Ferrari, just 24 points between them in the constructors. And as the Ferrari team pit will watch on, with Fred Vasseur at the helm coming into Ferrari for this season. Yeah, Mercedes, work to do then for the Brackley-based squad. Out there at the moment, Fernando Alonso is currently on a outlap on that medium compound of tyre, as is Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas. A few cars in the pits as well. This is the sound of Alex Albon coming into the Casio Triangle and turns into the right-hander, takes a bit of curve and actually loses a bit of stability in the rear, has to correct it through the steering wheel. And nothing too harmful there, but not the ideal coming into the final part of this lap.
No, that would absolutely be off-putting, because he's had to make a double correction in the middle of a corner where you're changing direction quickly anyway. So that would absolutely interfere with what he was doing on the second phase of the chicane.
Just want to make a quick point about Lando Norris. The race runs are starting, the race simulation runs. Norris has gone out on a set of soft tyres earlier than everybody else. And I don't think it looks like the soft tyre is going to be a race tyre, which would explain why Perez, Sainz, Alonso are all out on the mediums at the moment. Norris's lap times, Sam, go like this.
I think they've got it wrong. Alonso's on the soft currently.
Oh, he is, you're right, yeah. So anyway, we'll see how he gets on it. But Norris has gone 37.1, 37.8, 38.8.
Wow, so the tyre just overheats and loses performance and grip very quickly. The soft tyre around here, though, this is a high, intense lateral loading circuit where the soft tyre might be great for one lap, but even when you get to sector 3, it looks quite a handful at the end of your first push lap.
Well, the long runs are coming thick and fast now, with just over 17 minutes remaining of this free practice 2 session as Fernando Alonso comes out of the hairpin.
And do you know what's really, really annoying, Harry?
What?
Verstappen's just gone out for his race run on the test tyre. Now, it is the C2, which is the equivalent of the medium, and Pirelli being Pirelli, it's probably exactly the same as the old medium, because that's the way Pirelli seem to work. They do these new tyres and they're basically the same as the ones before. Sam's nodding and not saying anything. But it's just a little bit of an extra annoyance when we're trying to compare these long run lap times.
Yes, so as you say, Verstappen is out there just on an out lap at the moment, and everyone's starting to peel out on some medium or soft compound rubber. Alonso just finishing off his lap on those softs.
Red Bull will know that tyre is as close as possible, if not the same as the medium compound tyre. They wouldn't send Max Verstappen out there to do his race run preparation on a tyre that they don't know and don't understand. So I can imagine that the tyre, for all intensive purposes, it might have a T on it on our timing screen, but it might as well have an M on it for medium.
There's some slightly new, to change the subject, some slightly new paint out on track. The turn 1 curbing on the inside. Is it turn 2? I think it's as you come into turn. Yes, okay.
It's classified as turn 2.
Okay, so but it's on the inside of turns 1 and 2, and it's black and yellow to celebrate Sebastian Vettel's B initiative he's set up an insect hotel. And this is a biodiversity project, and it's not honeybees he's aiming at. He's mainly using sort of the bee icon and colours as a way of sort of raising awareness. All insects are welcome at this hotel. I believe, though, they are all listed as TBC1, TBC2, and TBC3 on the checking books. But Vettel, a 4-time winner here as well. He is back, and he said, this is probably the worst track to come back to because this is one of his favourites. He loves it here. He doesn't miss driving too much, but it must be so hard here. And actually, in between FP1 and FP2, walking down the pit line, just had a little look through the tinted glass of the Formula One hospitality, and I see Stefano Domenicali, the CEO of Formula One, having a rather intimate chat with Sebastian Vettel in there. So it just got me thinking,
you're going to be thinking all kinds of rumours now.
Well, there's all this chat of, should Vettel come back? It'd be great to see him on the grid. And I'm not convinced of that. And equally, I feel like he's had his time. He's had a brilliant career. But I could see him coming back in some sort of management role. Couldn't you?
Yeah, I could. And even with driving, yeah, he'd still be good. He'd still be good. It just depends on what he would accept as for the second phase of his career. He had he's had the third phase of his career. He's kind of already had two. He's had the magnificent era at Red Bull where he destroyed everybody. He's then had the kind of tailing off phase at Ferrari, going to the end at Aston Martin. And now if he were to come back again, he'd have to accept that he's not going to get a top line role at a Red Bull again, or a Mercedes, or a Ferrari. He'd have to look at a smaller team, and he'd have to be just comfortable and just love being in Formula One for being in Formula One. Sebastian Vettel has been an incredible driver in Formula One, and again, the record books show that he's one of the top 5 drivers the world has ever seen. But with regards to management, I think he's an intelligent guy, and he would suit that. But he's enjoying his role as an activist, isn't he? He's enjoying his role in being a kind of a planetarian and proving to people that we need to look after our planet.
He certainly is. He's become such an ambassador for the sport above and beyond. But it's not something he always had. He kind of developed that throughout the course of his racing career, and he's quite open about that, I think. So it's always good to see Sebastian Vettel back in the paddock, and he is here today. And actually, he got all the drivers; they all showed up for it on Thursday. He did that was sort of the opening ceremony for the Insect Hotel.
Even Lewis was there.
Yeah,
the first pictures I saw, I thought, Lewis hasn't gone, but actually, in fact, even Lewis was there. So every single Formula One driver showed up in support of Sebastian Vettel and his newfound love for beekeeping.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not newfound love, actually. I think this has been a long-term thing for him.
Yeah, and he's changed it. I just went on Sebastian Vettel's Instagram, and I think before this weekend, he only followed one person, and it was Lewis Hamilton. He now follows all the current grid, so he's obviously just gone through. Yes, hello, Rosanna.
Is it an insect hotel, or is it an Airbnb?
Oh, tumbleweed.
That is probably the worst.
I'm all alone down here.
I hope nobody's around you and overheard that.
No, I've taken myself off to a quiet corner of the pit lane, which doesn't exist. Do you know what I found really interesting about Sebastian Vettel's interview with Martin Brundle, of course, former F1 driver, saying that his neck wasn't up to speed for coming back to Formula One, but he can't say no about making a return. And I found that really interesting because I don't know about you, certain hobbies you might have had in the past or sports you might have played. If someone said, come and play a game of rugby, you're like, absolutely no way. You know it's a no, whereas to say I can't say no, I found that really intriguing. These guys are just addicted to it, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, back in my football days, if it wasn't for the knee injury, obviously, I'd be back in a heartbeat. But, sometimes you have to take the rough with the smooth. But, it is a really interesting one. But he can't rule it out, because I think he used a very good example that you look at all the others. Recently, Raikkonen, Alonso, you go back to Prost, Lauda, they all came back. They all
Michael Schumacher came back.
And Schumacher, they all wanted another bite at the cherry because they just couldn't stay away.
The love is there. And these are...
But this is your life.
We're not talking about... They are a different category. Let's say... I don't want to name another driver there, but the bracket of driver below the true superstars in Formula One. If one of those takes a bit of time out, it's very difficult for them to come back. We've seen it, okay, with Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg, and they've done a good job, but besides those two, I haven't really seen any from like the middle bracket go out to the sport and come back. It's normally just the megastars. And it's very difficult to come back and make an impression. I actually think that of recent times, Alonso's the one that's stood out and done a good job. I think Michael's time back in Formula One was more challenging. He got involved with a team that was struggling, I've got to say. And then they changed their reserve driver and they won everything. Oh dear.
Well, careful, you've changed your shirt colour now. Just 10 minutes left of this session to go, and we are still getting these long runs out there. Hamilton back out on that soft compound of tyre, seeing what he's made of. But it's Verstappen, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Russell, the top 5. Alonso, Albon, Piastri, Perez, Bottas, the top 10. Stroll, Ocon, Hülkenberg, Hamilton, Lawson, the top 15. Joe, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Gasly, Sargent, the 20 drivers. You make a very good point, the Hülkenberg, Magnussen point. In that bracket, they've had a couple of bites of the cherry. Magnussen's had 3, I think. Came back from McLaren, came back from Renault, came back from Haas.
Yeah, this tyre's only going one way.
Yeah, understood. We're seeing very high deg on others on the soft too.
Yeah, that's George Russell, and I think that one way is not a good way.
So we were on about earlier today in FP1, we were on about V-shape, V-style cornering versus U-shape style cornering. So one, effectively, you brake later, turn the car, slow the car more, and then get out the corner, and you effectively work on your entries and your exits. The U-shape is where you effectively carry more minimum speed. What we saw there is a prime example of a driver being able to do both. I know he's not very high up on the standings right now, but we are talking about a 7-time world champion in Lewis Hamilton. Lewis, when he was pushing, when the tyre was fresher, attempted the U-shape, so trying to carry minimum speed through the hairpin at turn 11. When doing the long run, he effectively tried to V-style the corner, took the apex very close to it, slowed the car more, got it out of the corner and tried to straight line the exit.
Yeah, that was just the sound in the background of Piastri finding the gravel, doing the classic run wide out of Degner 2, and actually probably running widest of the lot. That might have actually saved him a bit, because he went too far over the curve. I don't think he quite bottomed out as much, because he was more on the gravel that is further on the outside to driver's left. Logan Sargent doing pretty much the same thing, so that's almost a better line, really. You want to find the Astro and the gravel rather than the curbing, because then
I don't know, Harry. It looks like he's going to have an accident there to me this weekend.
Well, if you hold it, but then, you know, you don't. I'd rather do that than skirt and ruin the floor.
He doesn't look full of confidence around this track, and this track is. It's a difficult one, isn't it, to get right. It is the old school of
and he doesn't
circuits
know it.
Out there, and he doesn't know it, no. I think Liam Lawson does know it due to his time in Super Formula.
He does. I think Lawson's already raced here once this year in the Japanese Super Formula, which is basically as close as you can get to Formula One in Japan, and had a pre-season test here as well in that same category. Whereas I think the hope around Logan Sargent was when he got to the European races, he would feel more comfortable, he'd be able to get more out of that Williams, because of course he would have raced there in Formula 2 and Formula 3. But that's now been and gone, and the next race he'll know won't be until the finale in Abu Dhabi. And we're going, you know, he's got Qatar, Austin, Mexico, Sao Paulo and Vegas, which will be new for everybody. But it's doubly hard for him now. He's almost had the opportunity where he could capitalise on his experience, and now it feels like it's going to be harder for him.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, if that's new for him, what's not new for our listeners is something that we all enjoy, something that I haven't said in an awfully long time, but I'm delighted to talk about long run pace with a certain somebody.
Long Run Corner with Andrew Benson.
You can go the distance, we'll find out in the long run.
Well, it'll surprise nobody that the fastest driver on the long run as well as the short run.
Now, tell us.
is Max Verstappen by a country mile. He's a second a lap on average quicker than anybody else. He's just destroying the field this weekend, almost like he's trying to make a point.
But what about behind him?
Behind him is really interesting. So remember how I was saying that Lando Norris on the soft tyre was showing really high degradation? Well, he managed to stabilise that, and actually his average over sort of 6 or 7 laps of a run is a little bit quicker than both Ferraris have done on the mediums. And Alonso on the soft tyre is in that ballpark too, a little bit slower than Norris, but in the range. Russell on the soft, on the other hand, I've only got 3 laps down for him, which is like less than half of the others, and he's already 2 or 3 tenths slower than that group of Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Alonso. So again, Mercedes, long run and short, look like they're struggling.
So in terms of the pecking order at the moment, we're thinking Verstappen obviously leaps and bounds ahead, then this gaggle of Norris, Alonso, Sainz, Leclerc.
Yeah, so Ferrari, McLaren and Alonso, and then Mercedes after that, at the moment.
Got you, okay. Well, there we have it. Thank you very much, Andrew Benson, long run corner. This is Stroll, who is back out on track. He is on the medium compounder tyre. He's down in 11th at the moment, and good to see him back. First of all, after having to pull out of the Singapore Grand Prix after that huge shunt in qualifying in Q1, right at the end of it, big crash, and the car absolutely totaled. So all put back in one piece. So actually, a lot of work for the Aston Martin mechanics to have to do post Singapore, or on that Sunday at least. He comes across the line on his long run pace down in 11th with just 4 minutes left of the session.
I didn't get to speak to you about that crash because I wasn't working at the last Grand Prix, was I? So my opinion of that one was that that crash actually started the corner before, because for me, if you watch it back, he's had a huge correction and oversteer and a massive wheel spin out of the chicane before the final corner, and obviously that's put extra heat into the surface of the rear tyres, and an area where the tyre is already screaming and hot. So he's just sent the tyre over the top of its working range, and then when he's asked for grip and minimum speed in the last corner, it's not been happy. But
this
for me,
Stroll.
Yes,
I said exactly the same last weekend. Yeah.
Oh well, then two people that clearly know what we're talking about.
Clearly.
For me, it happened the corner before.
But you know that word pressure that I love so much.
Oh my god, it wasn't pressure. Well,
was it not? Was that not the first time maybe we've seen Stroll, because he was 20th and last, and that lap, even if he finished it, wasn't going to get him through into Q2. Was he just pushing that little bit far to find something?
I don't think it was pressure. I don't think that's pressure. I think that was okay. He was under pressure in that scenario because he wanted to do a faster lap time, but he's not under pressure in other ways that other drivers are under pressure. So due to the financial situation that he finds himself in with who his dad is. And
yellow flag in Sector 2, and it's an Alpine that has found its way into the wall, and that has brought out a red flag with only 2.5 minutes left of the session. And I think it's Pierre Gasly in the Alpine, just trying to see where Ocon is, or it might be Ocon as well. They both stopped in the middle sector, just trying to see whose helmet that is as well. But it's certainly an Alpine that is
that's Pierre
lodged
Gasly
in the wall, and that, no shock, that's brought out the red flag, and because there's only 2 minutes left of the session, it will not be resumed, and that is on the exit of Degner 2. And as Andrew was just saying moments ago, it is Gasly, and just as Andrew was saying, someone's going to have a crash there at some stage, and it is Pierre Gasly who now gets the headrest out and starts to make his way out of the car, but he's gone in front end to the barrier and destroyed the front end of that car as the Alpine garage watch on.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be Logan Sargent, because he's had 3 or 4 attempts at crashing at that corner and he hasn't quite managed it yet. A couple of other drivers too. Lewis Hamilton's had a couple of wide moments there, and Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo, but Pierre Gasly's done the job properly at this time. Sam, talk us through the crash. We're about to see it.
Well, let's see what he gets up to here. He's got traffic in front, a little bid of effect through Degner. And he's just locked up. That was strange. That was really bizarre. I don't know whether something's happened to the front right tyre going through Degner 1, but
locked up. Sorry for that.
He says he's just locked up, so maybe in the turbulent air of the car in front, he's just skated off and completely missed the corner. It wasn't like the accident that we thought we'd see. We thought we'd see somebody turn in a little bit too early and then get scrappily on the curb and then almost have a situation where the car kind of swaps ends with itself and then buries itself in the wall.
It was almost painfully slow to watch that. He was following his teammate, so that's why I had to check the timings, because Ocon was just ahead of him coming out of Degner 2, but he locked up, ran into the gravel, and looked like he actually saved it 1 minute. And then I think because when the wall comes slightly in, the rear hit it, and that brought him back round into the barrier.
This is why we love Suzuka. This is why we love these kind of tracks. You make a mistake, you pay for it. Other tracks we go to, that's not the scenario. Now, yes, it's a pain for the race team, but fans want to see a consequence for a mistake.
Well, that has brought out a red flag, but we only had 2 minutes left to go anyway. The clock continued to count down. It has now counted down to 0, and that is the end of the session. Everybody back into the pits, except for Pierre Gasly, who is out of his car walking away with the marshals, which is always good to see, but not the end to his session he would have liked. But at the end of free practice 2 then, laying down a marker, making a point, Max Verstappen in his Red Bull is fastest, ahead of Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Carlos Sainz and George Russell, the top 5. Alonso, Albon, Piastri, Perez and Bottas, the top 10. Stroll, Ocon, Hülkenberg, Hamilton, Lawson, the top 15. Joe, Magnussen, Tsunoda, Gasly and Logan Sargent, 20th and last at the end of the last day of track running, last time of track running, I should say, for the Friday.
Thank you very much, Harry, Sam and Andrew. Yes, there we go. FP2 done and dusted. A few people getting a little close to it, and then it was Pierre Gasly who found the wall at the very end of FP2. So after 2 sessions, how do we reflect on our Friday here at Suzuka Circuit, guys?
Well, I mean, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but it's business resumed for Red Bull and Max Verstappen, and we will cling on for this battle for second.
Yeah, the crazy battle for second in 2023. A bit of work to do for Pierre Gasly and the Alpine team there, or do you think it's a bit more superficial and not too difficult for them to fix ahead of tomorrow's FP3 session?
I definitely feel like the front corners are going to need replacing and then checking. There's a new front wing, it might be front edging of the floor, so that there is a lot of work to do. They'll be here till quite late, Rosanna.
Oh dear, Alpine hoping to get out and have some wonderful Japanese food this evening. Maybe not, maybe they have to wait a little bit longer. I'm looking and watching the fans who've been enjoying the action here at Suzuka. Of course, treated to a few different people near the top spot. Charles Leclerc fastest then over his teammate Carlos Sainz. So what do we read into that upgrade that Charles was running in the first session? We thought actually didn't go as well as the old iteration. Both drivers now with that, Carlos Sainz and Charles faster. So what do we draw from that little upgrade for Ferrari, or quite big upgrade actually?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to gauge really. How much is it upgrade? I mean, Leclerc was 3/10 off Verstappen's pace, Sainz half a second off, so there's a couple of tenths between them. How much of that? I don't know, Rosanna, in all honesty, but I think maybe this is Leclerc bouncing back after Sainz's strong run of form, and he's starting to lay a marker down. And right now, where we've been talking into this weekend of Sainz being the top man, Leclerc has come in and he's hit the ground running. Yeah, absolutely. One to watch for Ferrari.
We say that, but in the last session, Sainz was quicker than Leclerc. So,
yeah, and that's what's confusing. Well, exactly, yeah. That's what's confusing about the upgrade that they've been trialling over the course of today. Look, it's always interesting on a Friday. We can't read too much into it, but what I have read into is the traffic. A little bit of impeding, maybe something we need to keep an eye on during qualifying. And after last weekend in Singapore, rules and regs being followed, not sure straight to the letter, but it's something that's going to potentially affect qualifying tomorrow. So how do you prepare for that, Sam, going into FP3 tomorrow?
It's going to be very tricky with the traffic, Rosanna. I really don't know how you can combat it. I think that the governing body, the FIA and the officials can clamp down on it a little bit more. We don't tend to see enough penalties, in my opinion. People getting enough penalties for impeding. But let's see what happens. A lot of people as well in Sector 3 slowing down at the end of laps. That is always a concern at Suzuka. So let's see. Those are things to look out for.
Wow, yeah, something for the officials to look out for, and for us as well, and for the teams and drivers to work on, so that they put their drivers out at the optimum time. So, in terms of race pace on Sunday, if someone can out-qualify Max Verstappen and keep their elbows out, could we have another surprise on Sunday, or is it going to be slightly business as usual with Max Verstappen right at the front across the weekend?
I think that something really extraordinary would need to happen for Max Verstappen not to win the race. Being honest and truthful, I know that sounds boring, but he is a long way up the road, both in terms of quali pace and race pace. But never say never.
Never say never, Sam.
Exactly, never say never.
Keep that optimism. Come on, anything we can get.
Exactly. Well, join us tomorrow at 3:25 in the morning for FP3 and quali at 5 to 3.